Hi, it's Dédé Wilson from FODMAP Everyday. This is our second Facebook Live event. We're going to be chatting here for somewhere between 30 minutes and an hour about holiday baking and holiday entertaining. I'm here to answer all your questions. So the way we thought we would do this tonight is I have a ton of really usable, fabulous information for you. I'm going to just come at you with all of that great info. We're going to be posting links to recipes and pertinent articles. And if you have questions, just put them in the feed below. And then after I get done with each segment, after I talk about baking, I'll go take your questions and then we'll launch into entertaining. And then I'll take your questions about that as well. So if you're joining us for the first time, as I mentioned, I am Dédé. I'm here with my partner, Robin. She's womaning the camera, and we are the team that make up FODMAP Everyday. We are so excited. Our site is barely 3 months old. We are here for you with Monash certified recipes, tons of original recipes coming out of our test kitchen. We've got a team of registered dietitians that are bringing you articles. We're really trying to create the most helpful and really entertaining and fun low FODMAP community for you. So definitely drop us a line. We want to know what you want to see on the site. I come from a food background. I'm a cookbook author. I worked for Bon Appetit magazine for years. And speaking of books, so excited. My book has finally dropped. This is my first book that I've co-authored, my 17th book, but my first with a co-author. I wrote the book, The Low FODMAP Diet, Step by Step, with Kate Scarlatta. If you're a low FODMAP person, if you've been online at all researching the diet, I'm sure you know Kate's name. She and I wrote this book together for you guys. Tons of great information from Kate about the diet from the science and medical perspective. Over 130 recipes for you, original recipes that you're not going to find on the site. They're in the book, so it's a great resource for anyone in your life that's following the low FODMAP diet. It's going to be in stores this week, and it's available for pre-order right now. Now, I want to tell you about our giveaway before we get into tonight's topics. We are doing a giveaway with our friend Molly Chernitsky of Fit Fab FODMAP. Molly has a book out as well. So all you have to do for this giveaway is go to our Instagram feed for FODMAP Everyday or for Molly, also to Facebook. You can find the instructions there for the giveaway, and we will be giving away one of my books, one of her books, and some of Fodi Foods' brand new salad dressings that just hit the shelves. You can find a bunch of recipes using the salad dressings, creative ways to use them. There's a Caesar dressing, a ranch dressing, Thousand Island dressing, and a maple Dijon dressing, not just for salads. You can put that on fish, chicken, all kinds of creative ways. So for US and Canada, go look up the directions right away, get signed up. We're going to be picking that winner pretty soon. Then at the end of the week on the 22nd, we're going to start our UK giveaway. We have not forgotten about you guys. And then right after that, we're going to be doing a giveaway for our Australian friends. So definitely check out the Instagram feeds for FODMAP Everyday and the Facebook feed, and check out the instructions. So I'm losing my voice already. Hold on a second. So let's get into this. We did a Facebook Live last month, and we had so much fun, and we thought, what do we want to do coming up before the holidays? And I said, you know what? It's such a season to do baking. And the other thing about baking on the low FODMAP diet is that there are things that are going to apply to baking all year round. So it's a really, it's a topic that just makes a lot of sense with a lot of material that you'll be able to use throughout. So I thought the way I'd break it down is, let's go over some baking basics. What is particular to the low FODMAP diet? What is different when you bake, when you're on the low FODMAP diet? And I think the first thing that we need to talk about is flours, and also the mistaken belief that the low FODMAP diet is a gluten-free diet. And it's not. But we have a lot of gluten-free products that we recommend, that we use, gluten-free flours that we use, and so this is why it's applicable to baking. So here's why there's that seemingly contradictory information. FODMAP, as you know, stands for fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols. And so these are all these different groups of carbohydrates that affect a lot of us who have IBS. Wheat contains fructans. That is the FODMAP that is in wheat. You probably also know that wheat has gluten. So the deal is that we can't separate the fructans and the gluten from the wheat. So when we go on the elimination diet, when we're looking at the low FODMAP diet at its most strict, we are eliminating wheat, but not necessarily because of the gluten. We're eliminating it because we need to give our bodies a rest from the fructans. So when we're baking, a lot of times we need flour. A great majority of the time we need flour. And so we need to use gluten-free flours. Now here's the deal with gluten-free flours. You've got rice flour, you've got tapioca, you've got potato starch, you've got all these different things, and then you have blends. Now the thing about blends that are on the market, the blends are blended because by taking different gluten-free flours and putting them together in certain proportions, we can better approximate wheat flour. I also like to use blends because it makes it easier for us. I'm not asking you to go out and buy 6 different kinds of flour. But one key thing I want you to pay attention to, besides when you look at a label, you want to make sure that all of the flours in the blend are low FODMAP. Some blends have xanthan gum and some don't. And these are going to perform very, very differently in baking recipes. I use a blend from Bob's Red Mill in our test kitchen. It does have a little bit of xanthan gum in it. And so that is the flour that our recipes are tested with. And you are going to get the best results if you use that flour as well. If you don't have access to it, or if there's just another flour that you have that you want to use, flour blend, at least make sure it has xanthan gum. It's not that you can't use a blend that doesn't, but the results are not going to be the same. And if you're looking for that same sort of texture, so if you want to make your Nana's pound cake, if you want to make your uncle's, pie crust, and you're really trying to duplicate the kinds of baked goods that you ate before, this little bit of xanthan gum is going to help with that texture. So those are some important points when it comes to flour. Now, baking powder. Another thing, baking powder is a leavener that we're going to use in cakes and brownies and muffins and lots of baked goods. And some baking powders on the market are not gluten-free. And so the same thing, going back to the fructans, you want to read the label, you want to make sure that it's gluten-free. And I can tell you one thing, that one of the brands that I use, it doesn't say it right on the front. Like, you literally have to search it's a round little container. You have to look for the fine print, and it does say gluten-free. So if you are looking for gluten-free, either because you're trying to steer clear of the fructans or because you are eating gluten-free, you want to make sure that your baking powder is gluten-free as well. Another thing is lactose. So a lot of times we use milk, we use cream, we use buttermilk, we use sour cream, we use cream cheese in our baking. And lactose is one of the FODMAPs that we minimize or eliminate and or minimize in our diet when we're following the low FODMAP diet. So what are you to do if your recipe calls for a dairy product that contains lactose? Here again is some things that get confusing, and I hope I can clarify some things. Butter has lactose, but very little. Now, if you use the Monash University smartphone app, which we highly recommend you do, to help you understand throughout your day what is green light approved, in other words, what is low FODMAP and what isn't, you know that butter's okay. Now, how could that be if there's lactose in it? It comes down to serving sizes and portion control. It's because if we eat the small amount that is approved, it's okay. It's small enough for the low FODMAP diet to be considered and low enough in lactose to be tolerable. So now what happens when it comes to milk? I have a very funny relationship with milks. So years ago, I gave up dairy milk because I thought I needed to be dairy free with my IBS, and I was using soy milk. Soy milk in my cereal, soy milk in my baking, soy milk in my tea, and little did I know it was contributing to my breakthrough IBS symptoms, because soy milk, most soy milk, certainly in the US, is made from whole soybeans, and that's a no-no in terms of FODMAPs. So it took me a while to taste lactose-free whole milk. I assumed it was going to taste really odd, and I wanted something in my black tea in the morning. I wanted something that I could use to make my layer cakes and muffins and what have you, and I thought it was going to be strange. I don't know why, I just did. And then I tasted it, and it's fabulous. So when it comes to whole milk, skim milk, 2% milk, you should be able to find lactose-free cow's milk on your shelves, and that is low FODMAP and is absolutely the best substitution for a traditional baking recipe. Now, of course, if you're using a recipe that was developed to use almond milk or developed to use canned coconut milk, these are all other approved low FODMAP milks, and you certainly can use those. Now, in terms of other dairies, buttermilk is a big one with baking. Buttermilk is often called for in baking because the acidic properties of the buttermilk add a tang and also to the flavor of the baked good, but that it also adds a tenderness to the texture of the baked good. And there is no, at least here in the US, there is no lactose-free buttermilk on the market. So we have articles on FODMAP Everyday for that you can read that will show you how to make your own approximation of buttermilk at home. And it really is simply a combination of that lactose-free milk that I was telling you about, either whole milk, 2% or skim, with a little bit of lemon juice or white vinegar added to it. You let it sit for a few minutes, it thickens, it will approximate what buttermilk is, and you can use that as a substitution in any baking recipe that calls for buttermilk. Again, though, this all comes down to portion. When we're talking about baking, we're usually talking about sweets. And yes, we've got brownies and pies and cakes and all kinds of really delicious dessert recipes on FODMAP every day. But you do need to pay attention to the serving sizes. I mean, we look at these as occasional treats. And when we're talking about things like muffins, it's 1. When we're talking about things like cookies, it's usually 1 or 2. So, you know, it's funny. You can look at it one of two ways, right? You can say to yourself, oh my God, I can only have 1 cookie, and, you know, really sort of get into that mindset. I really prefer to think of it as, you know what? It's not never. This, you know, the diet isn't telling me I can never have a chocolate chip cookie. It's saying just be moderate, you know, be smart, make the recipes yourselves. You'll be able to control the ingredients, and you'll be able to have these sweets while you're on the low FODMAP diet. Other ingredients, let's talk about fats in general. I touched on butter. You know, fat, FODMAPs, the FODMAPs that we have to eliminate or minimize in our diet are all carbohydrates. So hopefully you know by now that fats and proteins are fine. I mean, we can use these in our diet and not worry about FODMAPs, but that doesn't mean that they don't have other properties that we should be paying attention to. A lot of people with IBS, heavy fatty foods do not sit well with them. If that's true for you, you probably know it. So you're not going to tuck into something that's really, really rich in fat and eat a large portion. So again, it comes down to portion control. Other ingredients, fruits, nuts, a lot of nuts are okay, but again, in proportion. Almonds, for instance. I think almonds are a great talking point, because you'll see high and low FODMAP lists, you know, someplace on the internet, and will say almonds are fine, and then you'll see another list and it says almonds are not. And believe me, I understand why it can get so confusing, because these seem to contradict each other. The problem is that sometimes you find resources where there isn't enough specificity. So the fact is that almonds are fine in a certain proportion. So 10 almonds you can have like a 1/4 cup of almond flour. If you come across a recipe that has 2 cups of almond flour or 1 cup of almond flour or ground almonds, you can make that recipe. You just have to understand what other FODMAPs might be in the recipe, and then you have to pay attention to portion control. You may not be able to have a piece of cake that's this big, but you might be able to have a piece of cake that's this big. So pay attention to portions for sure. So now let's talk about what's the same. I talked about equivalents and substitutions, but let's talk about the easy stuff, okay? Baking low FODMAP is no different than baking traditional baking recipes when it comes to your equipment. So, all the pots and pans that you've had and used, you can still use. Your measuring cups, your oven's the same. You don't need any special cake pans or anything like that. So all of that is the same. Baking powder is the same, but make sure that you have the gluten-free. Baking soda is the same. Spices, we can use cinnamon, ginger, cloves, all of those wonderful, wonderful spices we can use. Speaking of spices, a lot of us only bake around the holidays, and if you haven't refreshed your spice drawer since last year or even 6 months ago, it's time to go out and buy some new cinnamon, ginger, nutmeg, cloves, all of those. If you're making spice cookies, they're going to come out really flat if you're using old spices. Buy spices fresh. They should be turned over in 6 months. Store them in either dark bottles or store them in a drawer or away from light and away from heat. So you don't want them sitting on like a shelf right above your stove. And then you'll be good to go with all of those. Sugars, let's talk about sugars. We talked about fat, we talked about flours and leaveners and dairy, but certainly sweeteners figure in to baking. White granulated sugar is low FODMAP. You can use it. Brown sugar, you can use it. So most recipes, most traditional baking recipes are going to have those sugars in them. So you're good to go. You don't have to make any substitutions. Again, you do have to pay attention to portion. And the Monash University smartphone app will help you understand portions in that regard. Now, what about other sweeteners? Maple syrup, great sweetener. We can use that in baking. Rice syrup, also known as rice malt syrup, is a great sweetener. It's very thick. It's very thick and sticky. It measures cup for cup with maple syrup. It's a very gentle sweetener. I love it. It's not too sweet. We use it in our chocolate peanut butter energy balls, which are an awesome recipe. You should check those out. We use the rice malt syrup in those. Honey and agave, high FODMAP, you don't want to use those. If you have a recipe that uses honey, honey is a liquid sweetener, most likely your best substitution is going to be maple syrup, or you can even do halvesies, do half maple and half rice malt. And so that's the deal with sugars. Corn syrup, one thing to say about corn syrup, we have corn syrup, for instance, in 1 or 2 of our pecan pies on FODMAP Everyday. If you're oh my gosh, if you're a pecan pie fan, you have to check out our recipes. We've got some fabulous ones. Corn syrup is classically used in pecan pie, and it is low FODMAP, and it is not the same as high fructose corn syrup. Corn syrup and high fructose corn syrup, different things. We want to stay away from high fructose corn syrup because, right, one of the FODMAPs that we have to watch in our diet is fructose. High fructose corn syrup, fructose is in the name, right, has a very high proportion of fructose. That's why we have to steer clear of it during our low FODMAP diet. Regular corn syrup has a balance with glucose. It's okay. So when you check out a recipe, if it has regular corn syrup in it, you're good to go. I have butter written down in my notes, but we already spoke about that. One thing to mention about butter is certainly in baking, you're usually going to look for unsalted sweet butter, and there is a lactose-free butter on the market now through Green Valley Organics. It's a really interesting product. Check that out. So let's talk a little bit about all of those things that you might want to be baking. You know, cookies, cakes, tarts, pies, all this stuff. One thing about cookies, I've written actually a few books on cookies, one of them on Christmas cookies in particular, and I did this whole section about mailing, ones that are suitable to mail. You know, certainly a cookie that is really sturdy, that's what you want to look for if you want to make some cookies and send them to loved ones. Don't try to mail cookies that are really fancy, that are really delicate. They're just not going to get there intact. And my biggest tip, and I should have brought props. If you're going to mail cookies, get a tin, get a plastic container. Put your cookies in single layers in the container, separate the single layers with wax paper or parchment, and then leave headroom between the last layer of cookies and the lid. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna wad up a whole bunch of plastic wrap. Put that on the cookies, like have it mounded up, you know, taller than the container, and then gently squeeze down and put the top on. And what's going to happen is that plastic wrap is going to create a really soft cushion. And then the way you check to see if your cookies are ready to mail is shake. They shouldn't move in there at all. That's a great packaged cookie, ready to go. And then that's going to go in a bigger box. And then your bigger box is going to get filled with peanuts or crumpled up newspaper or whatever. And so then you also want to make sure that that box is not moving within the bigger box. And then mail them out. And my other big tip about mailing baked goods, mail it on a Monday. Mail it on Monday. You don't want to mail on a Thursday or a Friday, because what happens is the post office is really busy. It might get caught in a mail depot and be sitting somewhere overnight on a Sunday, and you want your baked goods to get where they're going as freshly as possible. One thing I didn't touch on is eggs. Let's talk about eggs for a moment, because they're key in baking. First of all, sizes. We use large eggs. Certainly there is absolutely a difference between medium, large, extra large, and jumbo. You want to use the size egg that is called for in the recipe that you are using. All of ours use large. If you have a recipe and you're in the US and it does not mention the size, the default is large. If you're a coffee cake fan, excuse me, I have a video class on Craftsy, which is a video platform, and someone just yesterday was in the UK, asked me a question about eggs, and it was really interesting because she made a cake and she used large eggs. She swore to me she used everything that I told her to use, and it didn't come out right. And she answered her own question. She said to me, you know, I think our large eggs in the UK are different sizes than your large eggs. So isn't that fascinating, right? They're both called large, but the gram weight per egg is different. So you guys in the UK, your eggs are a little larger. So it could be that your recipes might need to be adjusted. Now, you guys who don't want to use eggs and you want to use an egg replacer, like a flax egg or something like that, you absolutely can try. Flax eggs are a mixture. You know, flax, when they're soaked, they develop, you can develop a gelatinous quality, and it can have the same sort of binding action that an egg would have, and that's why people use it as a replacement for eggs in baking. The recipes that I bring you from our test kitchen, they've been tested as written, so I haven't tested any of them with an egg replacer. They should work. I actually would love to hear from you if there's some vegans out there who are tweaking some of the recipes and using egg replacers, and you've had a great experience, or maybe you just learned something in the process. I would love to hear about it. So certainly if you're vegan or you don't eat eggs for whatever reason, you can still bake and you can use an egg replacer and try it that way. Another question I get a lot is converting things. So what I mean by that is someone might have a recipe for a layer cake, and they'll write me and they'll say, I have something going on at my child's school or at my church, and I want to convert this to a 13 by 9 inch pan or some other size pan. Can I do it? Well, some recipes are mutable in that way. One really great trick is if you have a recipe that is for a particular pan. It could be any pan. It could be a decorative bunt pan, which is like a ring pan with fluting edges. It could be a round pan. It could be a square pan, whatever it is. If you have a recipe and it calls for a particular pan, put water in the pan. Fill the water up to the level that the batter would come. Then measure that water, okay? So let's say you end up with 12 cups. You know that the recipe that you have makes 12 cups of batter. What other pan takes 12 cups? You can take other pans that you might want to use, and now with water, you can play with that, and you'll be able to see, oh, you know what? This pan looked like it was going to take the same volume, but it didn't. But playing with water is cheap and easy, and you'll be able to see volume and determine. This happened the other day. Someone wrote me they wanted to convert a loaf pan into mini loaves, and they said, "Well, how many mini loaves will I get?" And I said, "Well, you know what? Mini loaves actually there are many different sizes of mini loaves." Actually, and they hadn't specified for me, so I didn't really know how to answer the question. So I said to the person, fill up your loaf pan with water, then take the mini loaf pans that you're going to use and see what you get. Maybe you're going to get 3, maybe you're going to get 2, maybe you're going to get 4. But in this way, they were going to be able to figure out in their own home how they could convert the batter to a different shape. And certainly if you're going to a different shape, you're going to want to take into consideration the fact that the baking time might be longer or shorter. And if you go to, if you have a really dense batter and you go to a deeper kind of pan, like let's say you double a recipe, you might want to turn the oven down by 25 degrees because you might want a slower, lower bake. Now in terms of the holidays, I tend to think of Christmas time and the winter holidays as a time to do what I call project baking, which is, making some fantastic, fabulous cake or baked thing that will also be like the centerpiece. It's sort of like the Thanksgiving turkey. For me, for Christmas, I usually make a bûche de Noël, which is a Yule log. It's the French classic Christmas dessert. It's a roll. It actually looks like a log, and I call them project baking because usually these things do have several components, but if you're a baker, if you like that kind of thing, if it's fun for you to bake in the kitchen, you like a challenge, we have 2 recipes right now on FODMAP Everyday. We have a bûche de Noël with chestnut and chocolate, and we have this really, really awesome red velvet cranberry cake. It looks like a birch tree on the outside. It's got sugared cranberries on the top, and both of these I would qualify as a project cake in the sense that there's several components. And actually, when we end this section and talk about entertaining in a few minutes, I'm going to talk to you about reading recipes and breaking things down and taking advantage of do-ahead steps. So certainly, even though these centerpiece baked goods have many steps, you absolutely can break things down. You can make buttercreams way ahead and they can often be frozen. You can make cakes ahead and they can often be frozen. So it doesn't have to be, an all-day affair the day before. I wrote down in my notes peppermint candy canes. What I wanted to say about that is, here we are at the holidays. Maybe it's your first holiday with the low FODMAP diet, and you're saying to yourself, you're thinking about all the things you're going to miss and the things that you're going to have to give up. And I understand that there might be some things you're really yearning for that have to be out of bounds for right now. But the thing about peppermint candy canes, there's plenty of things that we can still eat. A lot of peppermint candy canes are simply sugar. They might have some corn syrup, but not high fructose corn syrup. They might have a little bit of peppermint flavoring in them. These are things that we can eat. So you won't have to give up. Maybe it was always your tradition. You took a candy cane off the tree and, you sucked on it and you stirred it in your hot cocoa, or, there's many ways that people like to eat their candy canes during the season. And the thing is that you can, and there's plenty of things that you're still going to be able to eat. Now, I talked about cakes. Let's talk about pies for a moment. You know, pies are definitely a Thanksgiving thing here in the US, but pies are a holiday thing in general. And I have to tell you, I'm really thrilled with the gluten-free pie crust that we have on the site. This was a recipe that I really had to work at to not only create a flaky texture so that it would be really akin to, well, for me, it was my Nana, my Jewish Nana. Her, you know, she's famous for her pie crust. I wanted a pie crust that was really going to stand up to the pies that I grew up with. And I got to tell you, not only does this gluten-free pie crust turn out flaky and awesome, it's actually easier to work with than the pie crust that I used to make. And I'm not kidding you. And the trick, the key came when I realized that I could make it. Typically, you make pie dough and then you chill it. And you have to chill it because you have to allow the gluten to relax before you roll it out. Well, my first pie crusts, gluten-free low FODMAP pie crusts, I made and I chilled because I was so used to doing that. And then I would go to roll them out and they weren't so easy to roll out and they would crack, and you know, I would do it on parchment paper and then it was like a little easier, but it was still a little bit of a to-do. And then one day it occurred to me, wait a minute, Dédé, why are you letting it rest? There's no reason for it to rest. There's no gluten in it. And so you can make this pie crust and roll it out right away and it rolls out like a dream. And you're saving time. It doesn't even, you don't need to build in that 2 to 4 hour sit in the refrigerator. So if you haven't tried our pie crust yet, and it could be used for savory as well as sweet pies. You could make a quiche for breakfast morning or for New Year's Day. I really highly recommend that you check out our pie crust recipe because I think that you will love it. So that's kind of my, I've been chatting about baking for quite a while. I don't even know what time it is. Oh my God. All right. So now we're going to go check out your questions. Do we have anybody have any particular questions on baking? Oh, wait, Molly's there. Hi, Molly. How are you? Let's jump into entertaining. So just once more, if you're joining us now, I'm Dédé Wilson from FODMAP Everyday. We are online at FODMAPeveryday.com. My partner Robin is behind the camera, and we are trying to bring you the most engaging FODMAP community with original recipes. We have Monash University certified recipes. We've got a team of registered dietitians that are bringing you awesome articles, and my new book just dropped. It's going to be in stores this week. Pre-order available now. This is my newest book, The Low FODMAP Diet, Step by Step, co-authored with Kate Scarlatta, RDN. If you are following the low FODMAP diet or someone you know is following the diet, you definitely want to check out this book. And we are doing a giveaway. I just want to mention again that we have a giveaway going on. Check out the FODMAP Everyday Instagram feed or the Facebook feed. We are doing this in conjunction with Molly Tunitsky of FitFab FODMAP. We are giving away her book, we are giving away my book, and we are giving away Fody Foods brand new salad dressings. So all you US and Canadian folks, go to the Instagram and Facebook feeds, check out the instructions, sign up right away. We're going to be picking a winner pretty soon, and then Friday we have a contest starting for those of you in the UK, and right after that we're going to be getting together a giveaway for our Australian friends down under. So let's talk about holiday entertaining. Right now, we're a week away. Some of us are celebrating Christmas. Some of us are just getting together with families. So there's such a variety of entertaining that's going on right now, whether it's sort of formal sit-down dinners with intimate family. It could be the office party. It could be church bake sales. It could be school parties. It could be, maybe you're looking ahead and you're thinking about a New Year's Eve soiree or a New Year's Day open house. These things can take the form from, as I said, a sit-down dinner to, a very casual cocktail party and everything in between. Now, the fact that you're on the low FODMAP diet should not stop you at all. Should not stop you from going to any of these parties, and it should stop you from hosting these parties. By the way, we've got some great articles on the site that help you navigate parties, whether you're hosting or attending, and so check those out for sure. But let's say you're throwing the party and you're following the low FODMAP diet and you're feeling some challenge. Well, there's two things you have to do first, and one sort of overarching thing that I want you to know and really take to heart. Now, the two things you have to do is you have to set the menu and you have to set the budget. So is it a sit-down dinner, and what's your budget? Or is it a little cocktail party, and what's your budget? Those are the two things you have to do right up top, because everything's going to flow from there. But the number one thing that I want you to sort of take to heart is I want you to know that even though you're following the diet, that not only can you host a party, it's actually the best position to be in, because you're in control. You can set the budget. You can set, the menu. You can set both, but I'm getting at the menu. You can make sure that you have delicious, amazing food that you're going to enjoy, that all your guests are going to enjoy, and you are going to end the day and end the week and end this holiday season still feeling fabulous, because you're going to be able to help yourself adhere to the low FODMAP diet. If you go to our site, you can search by appetizer, you can search by main dish. There's a whole bunch of different ways how you can search, and you will see that there are a lot of, we're almost at 200 recipes. We're almost there. We're only 3 months old. We've got almost 200 recipes on the site. I could not be more thrilled about that, because we're giving you options. We're bringing you everything from soups to appetizers to nibbles to desserts. You're going to find what you need for your entertaining. So let's talk about logistics for a minute, because, I actually, Robin and I had food businesses before this. We've done a lot of different things, and one of the things that I did for many, many years was catering, was organize all kinds of different catering events. So logistics are sort of close to my heart. And I think for some people, whether you're on the low FODMAP diet or not, this is one of the things that people panic about. How am I going to have 10 people in my house? And how am I going to really be a gracious host? So let me help you out with some of that. Really think about, first of all, your sort of the tangibles that can't change. So things like, do you have one oven or two? I don't think that's going to change this week. What's your refrigeration availability? Do you have a second refrigerator in the basement? Is your neighbor your best friend? Are they coming to the party? Are they going to let you maybe use their refrigerator for overflow? You need to know this stuff. Then there's stuff that's logistics, but that is flexible. So let's say you are having a party for 10, but you don't have 10 matching dining room tables. That's the easy part, right? You can go tomorrow, pick up the phone, call your local rental company, rent some chairs, chairs and tables if you need them. But this is the stuff you can do now, early in the week, right? So let's say we're talking about a Christmas Eve or Christmas dinner at the end of the week. Do the stuff early that you can. So figure out your tables and chairs. Figure out your oven and refrigeration needs. Are you going to be putting linens on the table? Wash and iron them, or have the kids wash and iron them early in the week. This is stuff that you can get out of the way, so that as you get closer to the day of the party and the day before the party, you can really concentrate on the food, which obviously you're going to be prepare closer to the party time. You also want to think about your invite list. So as I said to you, I'm a big believer in being a low FODMAP host, because you can make sure that you are going to have food that you can eat. Now, being in this position of following a very specialized diet, I would think that you are particularly attuned to people who do have special needs. So know who's on your invite list. Is there a vegan? Is there someone with a really severe nut allergy? Is there somebody that is avoiding dairy? You know, what I tell people is you should have this information. It is definitely gracious as the host to make accommodations. But what I mean by that is if a vegan is coming, have a vegan dish. I'm not saying make the whole party vegan. If someone has a nut allergy, it's a little trickier. Maybe you do want to do a nut-free meal, or maybe you want to just talk to them about how you're going to structure the meal. You want, let's say you want to make your grandmother's stuffing and it has nuts in it. Discuss it with that person. Say, you know what, if it's in a casserole and it's by itself, is that going to be okay? So take some of these things into consideration. Make sure everybody's going to have something to eat. But the other thing is, I just want you to relax. This is one meal. Nobody's going to starve if they don't get to eat every single thing or every single course. So, you know, make some accommodations, but don't drive yourself batty. Now, I mentioned before, do-ahead tips. Let's talk about breaking down recipes and about do-ahead tips. On our site, we have the recipes, that we have the ingredients with bullet points, so they're easy to read, and then when you get to the directions of the recipe, they will be numbered, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Even if you're dealing with a recipe from another source that doesn't have numbers, most likely it's going to be broken down in paragraphs. And each of those paragraphs represents a separate step. Sometimes, if you're lucky, and I certainly try to work this into all of our recipes, the recipe developer will help you as they write the recipes. You might get to step 2 out of 5 steps, and it might say to you at that point, you can make the recipe up to this point and refrigerate it overnight. That's great. If you have that kind of information at hand, take advantage of it. It's going to help you with your planning, because this is all about, you know, entertaining, having a lot of people come over, whether it's a sit down or a cocktail party. You have to get into some of that juggling logistics stuff, and one of the best ways to make it easier for you is to understand what you can do ahead. Now, let's say the language isn't there. You know, just use your smarts, use your intuition, read the recipe, see if there's a spot where it makes sense. If it says it has to be refrigerated for a few hours or it has to rest overnight, I mean, understand that those mean that you can take a break at that time. Now, in terms of another thing that I love to do, and this is this comes from my restaurant days. This is more of a professional chef tip, but it's something that you can use in your kitchen. Think about it. When you go to a restaurant and you look at the menu, it's so funny. I'm going to use, well, let's see, I was going to use onions as an example, but we don't use a lot of onions in low FODMAP cooking. So let's use like parsley as an example. There will be parsley used in more than one recipe, let's say, or there will be chopped nuts used in more than one recipe. When you're in a professional kitchen, they're not chopping up just the parsley that they need for the lamb stew, and then chopping up the parsley that they need just for the garnish for this soup. What they're doing is they're saying, we know we have this soup on the menu today and this lamb on the menu today, and all told, we need 4 cups of parsley chopped for our use. So think like a chef, look at your recipes that you've chosen, see where there are duplications. Okay, now I use a lot of leek greens and scallion greens in my low FODMAP cooking. These are one of my big substitutions for onions, and so chances are they're going to be leek greens or scallion greens in more than one recipe, so chop them up all at once, prep them all at once. This is going to streamline your preparation, and it's all about making it easier for you, faster for you, and so that's one way you can think like a chef and get things done in a more fluid way. Speaking of onions, one of my very, very, very favorite low FODMAP tips, like ever, because I think a lot of us, we see that no onion, no garlic when we first get introduced to the diet, and we panic. Don't panic, no panicking. Here's my favorite tip. So we were talking, if you were with us at the beginning, I was talking about the fructans in wheat, and I talked a little bit about why we do use gluten-free flours in our low FODMAP baking. Well, fructans happen to also be the FODMAP that are in onions and garlic. And onions and garlic, and the fructans in onion and garlic, happen to be possibly the most problematic FODMAP for most people. It's the thing that just triggers IBS for more of us than not. And the idea of going without can be a little, can be very sad and a little scary. But check it out. The fructans are not oil soluble. They're only water soluble. So what does that mean? Practically speaking, what it means is you can, let's say you're going to make a big beautiful brisket or a beef stew for your party. You can take your Dutch oven or your big pot, you can put it on the stove, you can put your oil in that pot, heat it up. You can take a nice big juicy onion, cut it in half, put it in the oil, and I know right now someone's going, but I thought onions were high FODMAP. They are. But the fructans are not oil soluble, so what you can do is you can saute that onion in the oil and then remove the onion. Remove every single piece of onion before you add anything else, okay? So you're not putting your meat in there to brown, you're not adding a can of tomatoes, you are removing the onion. Now you have all of this luscious oniony oil. You can do the same thing with garlic. You can put garlic in there, saute it around, remove the garlic, and you've got all that flavor in there. Now you can put in your meat to brown. Now you can put in your other aromatics. Now you can put in your veggies and your can of tomatoes. So this is absolutely my favorite trick. It allows us to have onion flavor, to have garlic flavor, so that we never feel deprived. Robin and I, we came up with our motto early on for FODMAP Everyday. We are all about helping you thrive on this diet. This isn't about just getting by. This is about having really delicious food and cooking with whole foods, delicious, wonderful foods, just like you always did. We also have recipes and videos on the site showing you how to make your own garlic oil if you want to do it ahead so that you have it for a few days on hand. So there are absolutely ways that you can still get onion and garlic flavor into your cooking. So let's talk about alcohol. I actually don't drink. I love champagne. I drink it a few times a year. Other than that, it's not really my thing. Chocolate's my thing.